Saturday morning at Riverside Country Club meant one thing. Dad's weekly humiliation session disguised as golf. For 8 months now, I'd been avoiding these invitations, but today he'd practically begged me to join him and his prestigious foursome. Mr. Davidson from Davidson Industries, Mr. Chin, who owned half the downtown real estate, and Dr. Williams, the heart surgeon who'd operated on 2 senators. Just 9 holes, sweetheart, Dad had pleaded over breakfast. Mr. Davidson keeps asking about you, and I think some networking would be good. Networking. Right. So here I stood on the first tee at 8:15 a.m., wearing chekis and a polo shirt, looking like every other country club disappointment trying to blend in with the establishment. Dad was already setting up his shot, and I could feel the weight of the conversation he was about to have. "Gentlemen," Dad announced as his golf partners approached, "you remember my daughter, Sophia." Mr. Davidson, silver-haired and radiating the confidence of old money, smiled politely. "Of course. How's the job search treating you, dear?" There it was, the question that had been haunting Dad's Saturday mornings for months. "She's taking her time to find the right opportunity," Dad answered quickly, before I could speak. "Being selective about her next move." Being selective. That's what Dad called my apparent unemployment to his successful friends. Mr. Chin nodded sympathetically while adjusting his golf glove. "Smart approach. Market's tough for recent graduates right now. No shame in living at home until something opens up." Recent graduates. I was 31 with a PhD from MIT. But to these men, I was still the college kid they remembered from Christmas parties 5 years ago. Actually, I started, but Dad's gentle hand on my shoulder stopped me. "Sophia's been doing some consulting work," he said, keeping her options open. Consulting work. I almost laughed. That was one way to describe running a quantum energy company that had just revolutionized power grid storage. Dr. Williams paused his practice swing to join the conversation. "You know, if you're interested in healthcare administration, I have connections at Presbyterian Hospital. Good benefits, room for advancement." "That's generous," I replied carefully, "but I'm focused on the energy sector." "Energy?" Mr. Davidson's eyebrows rose. "Tough field to break into without connections. Very technical, lots of established players. Maybe consider something more entry-level first." Entry-level. The man was giving career advice to someone who held 17 patents in renewable energy integration and had just signed the largest federal energy contract in history. "She's always been interested in science," Dad explained, his voice carrying that familiar note of resigned disappointment. "We're hoping she finds something stable while she figures out her long-term goals." Long-term goals. As if building the company that was about to transform global energy infrastructure was just a phase I'd outgrow. "The key is managing expectations," Mr. Chin said, lining up his first shot. "Young people today get these grandiose ideas about changing the world, but you need to be realistic." Grandiose ideas. My grandiose idea currently had a market valuation of $4.2 billion, but sure, I should probably aim lower. "Exactly," Dr. Williams agreed. "Find something steady, build experience, maybe pursue your passions as a hobby later." A hobby? My hobby had just received a personal congratulations call from the President of the United States, but I kept that observation to myself. "Sophia understands that," Dad said quickly. "She's just exploring her options." I understood why Dad was struggling. For months, he'd been fielding questions from his golf partners about his apparently unemployed daughter, the MIT graduate who seemed to be wasting her potential. What he didn't know was that I wasn't unemployed. I was the founder and CEO of Quantum Dynamics Corporation, and yesterday we'd announced a $2.8 billion contract to modernize the entire U.S. power grid. But because I hadn't told him, and because my lifestyle didn't scream billionaire entrepreneur, he assumed I was failing. What might help, Mr. Davidson said, pulling out his phone, is updating your LinkedIn profile. I took a look after your father mentioned you were job hunting. Honestly, it's pretty bare. No recent employment, no professional headshot. My LinkedIn profile. The one I deliberately kept minimal, because every time I updated it, I got overwhelmed with speaking requests and investment opportunities. I appreciate the feedback, I managed. And consider relocating, Dr. Williams added. Energy jobs are really concentrated in Houston and Denver. Can't build a career from your laptop at home. From my laptop at home. I'd built a multi-billion-dollar company from the converted warehouse I'd purchased for $3.2 million cash, but apparently, that didn't count as a real workplace. She's not living at home, Dad corrected quickly. She has her own place. It's just modest. Modest. Dad's diplomatic way of saying he was embarrassed by my lifestyle choices. Nothing wrong with modest, Dr. Williams said kindly. But eventually you want something that reflects your ambitions. Image matters in business. Image matters. Last week, I'd had dinner with the Secretary of Energy to discuss grid modernization policy. But apparently, I needed to work on my professional image. The real key is networking, Mr. Davidson continued, warming to his role as career counselor. Can't just submit applications online. You need face-to-face connections. Like today, Dad said hopefully. This is exactly the kind of networking Safia should be doing. Mr. Chen finished his shot and walked over. You know what? I have a niece about your age who went through something similar. Took 2 years to find her footing, but she's doing well now in marketing. Sometimes it just takes patience. Patience. I'd had plenty of patience during the 3 years I'd spent in stealth mode, building revolutionary quantum storage technology, while everyone assumed I was wasting my education. The important thing, Dr. Williams said as we moved toward the second T, is not letting pride interfere with practical opportunities. I see young people turn down good entry-level positions because they think they're overqualified. Overqualified. 3 months ago, I'd been the keynote speaker at the International Energy Summit, but maybe I was being too picky about job opportunities. Safia's not like that, Dad said, though I heard the uncertainty in his voice. She's always been practical. Practical, like spending $180 million of my own money on research and development before anyone else realized quantum storage was commercially viable. Very practical. You know what might help, Mr. Davidson said, is if we made some introductions. I know people in energy, nothing high level, but good entry points. Entry points. He was offering to help me get entry-level positions in an industry where I was about to become one of the most influential leaders. That's very kind, I said, because it genuinely was, even if it was completely unnecessary. We should set up informational interviews, Dan said, his excitement growing. Help Safia understand how the industry really works. Understand how the industry works. I held more renewable energy patents than anyone under 40, but apparently I needed informational interviews to grasp basic industry concepts. We'd made it through 4 holes with more career counseling than golf, and I was starting to feel genuinely sorry for Dad. He'd clearly been making excuses for my apparent failure for months, trying to maintain his reputation among friends who all had successful children. What you really need, Mr. Chen said as we waited for the group ahead to clear the green, is a mentor. Someone who's navigated the business world successfully. Excellent idea. Dad agreed immediately. Safia would benefit tremendously from that kind of guidance. A mentor. My board of directors included the former Secretary of Energy, a Nobel Prize winner in physics, and the founder of Europe's largest renewable energy company. But perhaps they weren't the mentors Mr. Chen had in mind. I'd be happy to help, Mr. Davidson offered. Start with basics. Proper cover letters, interview techniques, professional presentation. Professional presentation. 2 months ago, Anderson Cooper had interviewed me for 60 minutes about the future of clean energy, but sure, maybe I needed help with basic communication skills. And confidence building, Dr. Williams added. You've been pretty quiet today. In business, you need to advocate for yourself. Quiet. I was quiet because I was trying to navigate a conversation where 4 successful men were giving remedial career advice to someone who'd accomplished more in their industry than they had in theirs. She's always been reserved, Dad explained. But you're right. She needs to learn self-promotion. Self-promotion. Forbes had called me the most transformative energy entrepreneur of the decade, but apparently I needed help getting my message out. As we approached the 5th tee, Mr. Davidson pulled out his phone again. You know what? Let me call my friend Mark Thompson right now. He runs a renewable energy consulting firm, small operation, but perfect for someone starting out. Starting out. He was about to offer me entry-level employment at a company that probably licensed technology my patents had made possible. That's really not necessary, I started. Nonsense, he waved me off. Mark's great with young people. Let me just... He was actually calling someone to get me a job. The gesture was so genuinely kind and so completely misguided that I felt awful for not stopping him. Mr. Davidson, before you... No need to be nervous, he said, dialing. Mark's very approachable. Dr. Williams nodded approvingly. This is exactly what you need, Safia. Sometimes one person believing in you opens all the doors. One person believing in me. The president had personally called to congratulate me on our Department of Energy contract, but Mr. Davidson's faith was touching too. Really, that's not. Mark, Bill Davidson here. I have a brilliant young woman who might be perfect for that junior analyst opening. Junior analyst. I was about to be recommended for a position analyzing the same market trends my company was creating. Yes, energy sector, MIT PhD, very sharp, just needs the right opportunity. That's when Mr. Chen, who had been half listening while setting up his shot, suddenly straightened and stared at me. Wait, he said slowly. What did you say your last name was? Morgan. Safia Morgan. His eyes narrowed as he studied my face. Why do you look so familiar? Dad glanced over, still half focused on Davidson's phone call. She has one of those faces. People always think they recognize her. But Mr. Chen wasn't satisfied. He pulled out his phone and started typing. Safia Morgan, Energy, NIT. I watched him Google me, knowing exactly what he was about to discover. Holy shit. Mr. Chen's face went white. Bill, hang up that phone. What? Mr. Davidson looked confused, still mid-conversation. Hang up the phone. Right now. The urgency in Chen's voice made Davidson quickly end his call. Mark, let me call you back. All 3 men turned to stare at Mr. Chen, who was looking at his phone like he'd seen a ghost. Gentlemen, Chen said slowly, I think we may have made a significant error. What kind of error? Dr. Williams asked. Chen turned his phone around so they could see the screen. It showed yesterday's CNBC interview. Me sitting across from the anchor with the tire I'm reading. Sophia Morgan, CEO, Quantum Dynamics Corp. $4.2 billion federal contract. The silence that followed was absolute. Dad's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and then something approaching shock. Yesterday's CNBC interview. Chen read aloud. CEO Sophia Morgan discusses revolutionary quantum storage technology and $2.8 billion Department of Energy contract. Davidson slowly lowered his phone. You're the quantum energy CEO from the news. The one who solved grid storage, Dr. Williams added, his voice barely audible. The youngest person ever to sign a multi-billion-dollar federal energy contract. Chen finished. All eyes turned to me. Yes, I said simply. That's me. Dad's golf club slipped from his hands and clattered onto the tee box. But, Davidson struggled for words. Your father said you were looking for work. I didn't say that, I replied gently. Dad said that. Everyone turned to stare at Dad, who looked like he'd never seen me before. Sophia, he said slowly, when you said you were working in energy, you meant you own an energy company. I founded it, built it from nothing over the past 3 years. 3 years, Chen repeated. The same 3 years your father's been telling us. You were figuring out your direction. I was figuring out my direction. I just figured out how to revolutionize clean energy storage in the process. Dr. Williams was frantically scrolling through articles on his phone. Forbes 30 Under 30, Time's Most Influential Leaders. Nobel Committee nomination. The consulting work, Davidson said weakly, looking at Dad. Apparently meant running a Fortune 500 company, Dad replied. The absurdity was finally hitting them. They'd spent an hour giving career advice to someone who'd just transformed the energy industry. The entry-level positions we discussed, Mr. Chen said, shaking his head. We were trying to help you get junior roles in an industry where you're apparently one of the most important people. And the networking advice, Dr. Williams added. We told you to meet people in energy. While she's probably on speed dial with every major player in the sector, Davidson finished. Dad was still staring at me in shock. Sophia, why didn't you tell me? Because every time I tried to explain what I was building, you seemed to think I was being unrealistic. Remember when I mentioned the patent applications? You worried I was spending money I couldn't afford on pipe dreams. Dad winced. I remember. And when I told you about the research facility, you asked if I could afford the rent. Research facility, Chen interrupted, checking his phone. You mean the 50,000 square foot complex downtown that everyone's been trying to identify the owner of? That's the one. I bought it 2 years ago and converted it into a quantum research lab. You own the old semiconductor plant? Bought it for $18 million. Cash. The 3 men exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Sophia, Dad said quietly, what is your company actually worth? As of yesterday's market close, $4.2 billion. Though that was before the federal contract announcement, so probably closer to $6 billion now. And your personal stake? 73%. More silence as they did the math. So you're worth, Chen began, about $4.5 billion. Dad sat down heavily on the bench. $4.5 billion. It fluctuates, but yes. The modest apartment I've been worried about is a converted warehouse I'd bought for $3.2 million. I like the industrial aesthetic. And you don't drive a luxury car because I think conspicuous consumption is wasteful. The Honda gets me where I need to go. Dr. Williams looked up from his phone. Says here you're speaking at Davos next month. Next week, actually. Panel on Sustainable Energy with the German Chancellor. And you've been appointed to the President's Science Council. Accepted that position last month. Davidson looked physically ill. Sophia, I just tried to get you a $45,000 a year analyst job. It was thoughtful of you. I told Mark Thompson you were smart and just needed a break. You meant well. Chen was shaking his head. Your father's been apologizing to us for months about your career struggles, while his daughter was busy becoming one of the most successful entrepreneurs of her generation. Williams added. And we've been feeling sorry for him, Davidson said, having such a brilliant child who couldn't find her way. Dad looked up at me with something between awe and embarrassment. Sophia, the worry I've been carrying. I know, Dad. I'm sorry I didn't handle this better. I just got tired of arguing about whether my goals were realistic. Realistic, Chin muttered. We were telling the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company to be more realistic about her career expectations and to consider entry-level positions, Williams added. In companies that probably license her technology, Davidson finished. The irony was overwhelming for all of them. When Mark asks why I hung up, Davidson said weakly, what do I tell him? You could explain that you discovered the person you were trying to help actually owns patents that his company uses. Dr. Williams started laughing. Genuine, incredulous laughter. Bill, you just tried to get the founder of Quantum Dynamics an entry-level position at a firm that pays her licensing fees. It's not funny, Davidson protested, but he was smiling too. It's a little funny, Chen agreed. We spent an hour giving business advice to someone who probably knows more about building companies than all of us combined. Dad was shaking his head slowly. I feel like such a fool. Don't. You feel like a father who was worried about his daughter's future. That's not foolish. That's loving. But I've been making excuses for you to my friends for months. And now you can tell them your daughter just signed the largest clean energy contract in U.S. history. The mood was finally shifting from shock towards something that might eventually become pride. The confidence advice we gave you, Williams said, about speaking up for yourself, was actually good advice. Presentation skills always need work. But you've already presented to everyone who matters. I've presented to everyone who matters now, but I remember starting out and not knowing anyone. Your advice would have been valuable then. Davidson was putting his phone away. Sophia, when we were telling you about being confident in interviews, I was taking mental notes. Even successful people can improve their communication skills. You were humoring us. I was learning from you. Success in one area doesn't mean I can't learn from people successful in other areas. Chin nodded thoughtfully. That's probably why you've achieved so much. You're still willing to listen, even when the advice comes from people who don't realize you're already far beyond where they're trying to help you reach, Williams added. We'd somehow turned a golf outing into the most surreal career counseling session in country club history. So what happens now? Dad asked. Do we finish the round? I looked at these four men who'd spent their morning trying to help someone they thought was struggling, only to discover their advice recipient was more successful than they'd imagined possible. I'd love to finish, I said. Though maybe we could talk about something other than my employment prospects. Deal, Dad said immediately. Though I reserve the right to ask about quantum energy storage, since apparently my daughter is reshaping the future of electricity, and I've been too worried about her rent to notice. That's fair. As we walked toward the 6th tee, Mr. Davidson fell into step beside me. Sophia, I hope you know everything this morning came from genuine care. I absolutely know that, and I'm grateful for it, even though our advice was completely off base. Your advice wasn't off base, it was misdirected. But the impulse to help someone succeed, that's never wrong. He smiled. Your father raised a very gracious daughter. He raised someone who understands that successful people lift others up, even when they don't realize how high that person has already climbed. And with that, we finished our round, not as a worried father and his struggling daughter, but as a family learning to see each other clearly for the first time.